So how do you retire smart? What does it take? First, I want to talk about the financial aspects of things. So the first step in retiring smartly is to look at your expenses. And not just to look at your expenses, but to actually test drive your expenses. A lot of people will come to me and say, hey, Azul, we're currently spending $5,000 a month. I've heard we can cut back to 80% of that when we retire. So we're budgeting $4,000 a month. It's one thing to put $4,000 a month or whatever your number is in your spreadsheet or on your piece of paper. It's an entirely different thing to actually live it. And so the practical advice I have for you is try to live with that budget to the extent that you can. Obviously, the hard one is if you're planning on downsizing your house, you won't be able to do that. If you're planning on selling your house and living in an apartment, you probably won't be able to do that. But maybe you get a deal on an Airbnb nearby and you live in the apartment for a month. But the basics on what you're going to spend for going out to eat, on what you're going to spend for entertainment, what you're going to spend for travel and vacations, things like that. Boy, if you can test drive that for 30, 60, 90 days, or even better, maybe a year, that's going to put you in a much better position to be able to retire smartly. Because for some people, they're going to say, you know what, that felt a lot more sacrificial to me than I thought it was going to. And I'd rather work a little bit longer rather than live on that lifestyle. And for other people, they'll say, I don't know what the big deal is. It was fun. It was perfectly fine. And maybe we can even cut back a little bit more. And maybe those people can actually retire even sooner. So number one step to retiring smartly is to test drive, not just come up with a budget, but to test drive your budget. Okay, number two is we have to look at what are our sources of income going to be when we're retired. So we've got our expenses. This is the nut that we need to meet every month. And where's that money going to come from? And so that's why looking at your income streams, which for most of us is going to be at some point Social Security. For most of us, it's going to be money coming out of our investment accounts. Some people might have a pension. Very few people have a pension. And if you do have a pension, be sure to look at how is it indexed for inflation. Some people don't have any indexing. The amount of money that you're going to get, that's it every month. And 30 years from now, it'll be that same monthly amount. Other people have a set amount. Maybe it increases by 2% every year. And other people, mostly government employees, people that served in the military, have a pension that is indexed for inflation. So it's adjusted based on the cost of living. So look at that, your income streams, both from a pension, Social Security. You may have rental income property coming in. You may have some rental properties. Whatever that is for you. Some folks have annuities. So if you have annuity income coming in, put that in there as well. And then look at your investments. And for the income off of your investments, a good rule of thumb, I'm not saying it's right for you, but many people will use 4% off of their investments. So they'll say that's the income, that's the money that they can take out of the account. For some people, that 4% rule might seem a little too aggressive, and maybe they want to take a little bit less. For other people, they'd say, wow, that's awfully conservative. In fact, one thing to note is the person that came up with that 4% rule, Bill Bengen, and he came up with that in the mid-90s, has actually revised his number up based on recent things that he did. So his initial study was very limited. It had just really U.S. large cap stocks, and it had intermediate U.S. treasuries were the two holdings, about 70% in the stock market, so in those large cap stocks, the other 30% in those intermediate term treasury bonds. But his new study has that number being closer to 5%. So look at those income streams, see if there's a gap anywhere in there, and how can you fill that gap. Another strategy for income would be dividend stocks. If you search my channel on dividend stocks, I've done a video on that as well. For some people, that can be a really nice solution where they live off the dividends of their portfolio. And then if they have legacy goals, then the stocks over time, hopefully, if they've chosen wisely, if they're the right stocks, hopefully those go up in value over time. So living off the income and then leaving the remainder, the actual stock shares, to their heirs. I've seen people do that. I've seen it work well and I've seen it not work well. It all comes down to, obviously, the investments that you choose. So step one is get your hands around your expenses and to test drive that. Step two is to look at your sources of income. And then just ask yourself, here's my income, and are your expenses here or your expenses there? And what happens if they don't match up? Is there a way to bridge that gap? I talked about the 4% off of investments. In many of those cases, when people pass away, there's still a lifetime value for that. So one way to bridge that gap, I'm not licensed to sell annuities. I don't want to sell annuities, but you should know about them. One way to bridge that gap might be with annuities. Now, you want to be careful. I'd suggest that you work with somebody that's a fiduciary to you 100% of the time to see if annuities might be able to bridge that gap. Because if you go to somebody who sells annuities, they tend to be high commission products, so you'll be more likely to be told, yes, annuities are a perfect solution for you. I want you to find the solution that's right for you, not the one that gives a salesperson the highest commission. Okay, step 4 to retiring smartly is, did you plan for taxes? And many people, when they think about their budget, they're like, oh yeah, you're right, taxes, I forgot that. And it's not a problem. It could be a problem, but it's not a problem if you think about it ahead of time. It's not a problem if it wasn't on your list initially, but now it is. And that's the whole purpose of videos like this, is to put these things on your radar screen. For many retirees, taxes are one of their biggest expenses. And that's why it's important to think proactively as far in advance as you can. Is where do you want to be able to pull your money from? It's one thing to save up enough money that you have enough money to retire, but it also matters where that money is. For most of us, we have 3 buckets that we can put money in. We have a tax me later account, which is your traditional IRA, your traditional 401k. We got a tax break. We didn't get taxed on the income that we earned for the money we put in. But now when we take it out, it's time to pay the piper. It's time to pay the government. The second place is a tax me never account, which is the Roth version. So we didn't get the tax break day one, but now we never have to pay tax on that going forward, at least according to current federal tax law. And then we have the tax me as I go account, which is money that's in the local bank account. So you want to think through those 3 buckets, because if all of your money's in a regular 401k, a regular IRA, then every time you take money out to buy groceries, every time you take money out of your accounts to put gas in your truck, all of that is going to be taxable income. And so it's much nicer to have these 3 different buckets. The US has 7 tax brackets, really an 8th. The first one is 0% tax bracket, but then there's the 10, the 12%, and then it jumps all the way to 22%. There is no 14%, 16%, 18. It's 10, 12, 22%. So the reason you want to have all those buckets is you're hoping to get as much money out of your accounts at those low tax brackets, the 10 and 12%, and hopefully not trigger the 22%. And then above that, it actually the same thing happens. So it goes 22, 24, and then I believe it jumps to 32. So there's again that gap. So if you're in that ballpark, you want to take advantage of the tax brackets that are less than 25%. So plan for your taxes, and for most of us, it makes sense to hire an accountant, to hire a financial advisor for us to think about. And what really makes sense is to think about your health as well, because all of this on the financial side is great, but if we lose our health, then we're not going to enjoy our retirement as much as we otherwise would be able to. And the other qualitative question, the other emotional question, the other mental question, as opposed to a number that you calculate, is when is the right time for you to retire? And that's why I made this video up here. Why retiring at 65 might be a big mistake. I'll give you a teaser. If you're 60 or older, unfortunately, most of us are going to have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy active time. So be sure, that's not a lot of time, so be sure to watch this video and make the right decision for you. Why retiring at 65 might be a big mistake.